and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to those of you watching on TV and listening on DAB. Coming up on Real Britain, we'll be asking whether the cost of net zero is a price worth paying. Plus the House of Lords, should we keep it, reform it or scrap it? And speaking of scrapping things, the Northern Ireland Protocol. What is it? How does it impact the UK? But first, it's the news with Olivia Guthrie.
Thank you, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. A former minister has become the latest MP to submit a letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson. Nick Gibb, who was schools minister last year, has joined a number of fellow Conservatives calling on the Prime Minister to resign after allegations of lockdown parties at Downing Street. Writing in the Daily Telegraph this morning, Mr Gibb says his constituents are furious about the double standards. It's reported up to 17 MPs have now submitted letters, but a total of 54 are needed to trigger a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Speaking to GB News, former Defence Secretary Dr Liam Fox says the lockdown party scandal is distracting people from more important issues.
We've really got to stop becoming a one-issue country in terms of our media coverage and start getting on to talk about the issues that really affect people in our country. Of course, they're cross about the issues surrounding potential parties in Downing Street. We've got a police investigation that will give us the answers to those. Until we get those answers, we should start talking and acting on the issues that really matter to the quality of life of people in our country.
Dr Liam Fox. Social media firms will now be forced to actively remove illegal content without waiting for it to be reported by users. Under the online safety bill, companies are required to remove a range of illegal material, but now several new criminal offences are being added, including revenge porn. Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries says the government hopes the bill will bring the full weight of the law against those who use the internet as a weapon to ruin people's lives. Boris Johnson has spoken with the French president over the tensions on the Ukraine border. Downing Street says the Prime Minister and Emmanuel Macron both agreed a diplomatic solution to the current tensions must remain the overriding priority. The French leader will visit Moscow next week to hold discussions with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The planned visit comes as China backed the Kremlin's demand that NATO doesn't allow Ukraine to join the military alliance. Over in the US, the former Vice President Mike Pence says he could not have changed the results of the 2020 presidential election. It follows renewed claims by Donald Trump that Mr. Pence could have overturned the Democrats' victory. During a speech in Florida, though, Mr. Pence directly challenged his former boss's assertion that he should be investigated for failing to prevent Joe Biden taking office.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
Former Vice President Mike Pence. Meanwhile, the US military says an airport attack in Afghanistan that left 13 American troops and 170 Afghans dead could not have been prevented. The blast happened in the capital, Kabul, last August, as US troops were helping with evacuations in the aftermath of the Taliban's takeover. It was believed to be a complex attack involving ISIS-K gunmen, but the inquiry showed there was only a single bomber. US Army Brigadier General Lance Curtis says security protocols were correctly followed.
Based upon our investigation at the tactical level, this was not preventable. And the leaders on the ground followed the proper measures. And anytime there was an imminent threat warning, they followed the proper procedures.
US General Lance Curtis. Well, back in the UK, police in Birmingham have issued an appeal after an urn containing a child's ashes was stolen during a break-in. The urn, which police say is of little monetary value, was taken on Friday in the Garrett's Green area of the city. Officers say the ashes belong to the homeowner's first child, who was stillborn almost 10 years ago. More than 400 Roman skeletons have been found by HS2 archaeologists. Workers on the high-speed rail network discovered the remains, thought to be over 1,600 years old, near Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire. 40 of them were beheaded, with their heads placed by their feet, suggesting they may have been criminals or outcasts. And the Six Nations rugby tournament kicks off today. Ireland will be taking on the retaining champions Wales in Dublin this afternoon, while Scotland will be hoping to retain the Calcutta Cup in their match against England in Murrayfield later on. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Darren.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on the show. GB News' Rachel Sweeney has been out in County Durham in concert, getting your opinions on whether or not higher energy prices is a price worth paying to reach net zero. This week, Paul Givan resigned as Northern Ireland's First Minister as part of the Democratic Unionist Party in protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. In our campus clash, 2 students will join me to debate if we should scrap the protocol altogether. Now, last week we launched the show and I've been inundated with feedback from you at home. It means the world to us that you took the time out of your day to give your opinions on my debut show on GB News. Martin said, "Hi Darren, looking smart in the double-breasted suit. I've always been a fan of these, so thank you for helping to bring them back, this fashion item, bring them back to the fore. It's been a great and informative show. Keep up the good work." Well, that's very kind, Martin. Ed said, "Grimes is as clueless on Brexit as all the other turkeys who voted for it." Aye, well, we're all turkeys who secured, by the way, the fastest vaccine rollout in not only Europe, but much of the world too. So gobble, gobble, gobble to you, Ed. Meanwhile, on a busy weekend, Grace got in touch with this heartfelt comment to say, "He has the face only his mother could love." Well, hey, if I was too bonny, you'd be too entranced by my beauty that you wouldn't pay attention to what I'm saying, Grace Pet. Anywho, let's crack on with the show. Now, I voted for this Conservative government. I don't think that's any secret. I voted for it to actually emancipate, not immiserate the working class, to actually give hope and opportunity to forgotten communities like that one I was brought up in County Durham, not to force a choice between heating and eating in one of the biggest economies in the world. But I'm afraid that's what's taking place today under this con-socialist government. I'm bored of talking about cake. I want the media to focus on what policies politicians push through via woke soundbites on a radical green agenda, pushed by elites whilst we're sat on a plentiful supply of gas right now, but deliberately choose to import it instead. It's the same with coal. What do you think builds those great big windmills of steel and cement? And folks, I wonder if those calling for these gargantuan subsidies in those windmills and away from gas have ever had to choose between warmth or food. I'm going to guess no. And that's what makes me so angry, right? Privileged politicians in power that haven't a clue. It won't be those gorging on cake during lockdown that actually do it for Boris. It'll be the tax rises, the illegal migration crisis, the spending money on housing foreigners over our veterans, the net zero plan, the COVID loan fraud, and much of the lockdown madness that has pushed us further into debt than we already were, causing spiralling inflation. That'll be what does it for Boris. According to reports on Downing Street, many pro-green advisers and other eco-fanatics close to the Johnson household matter more to the Prime Minister than the Conservative Party's new voters. Voters set to be squeezed tighter by this cost of living crisis than my suit trousers here post-lockdown. One of the reasons I campaigned for Boris, and for Brexit indeed, was to fix the democratic deficit. No longer, you see, could our MPs turn around and say, well, you see, guys, there's nought we can do about it because it's laws set by Brussels. It's out of our hands, mate. Don't look at me, Gov. Well, now lawmaking is very much in the hands of Boris and his 80-seat majority. But folks, as they march ahead with net zero policies that'll leave us all colder and poorer, I would argue that it's time the British people were given a say over this green extreme plan to decarbonise the entire British economy. All of the major political parties had net zero form part of their manifestos in 2019's election. However, just like for such a long time, membership of the EU was a central plank of each of the manifesto parties' the commitments they put forward in those manifestos, so now is net zero. So I say, folks, a referendum on net zero, one in which the government has to set out what this asphyxiating noose around the British economy's neck will mean for us all, is vital. Rishi Sunak has said that higher energy prices are something we will have to get used to. Well, I'm sorry, Rishi, but I don't agree with that at all. Higher energy prices are the result of deliberate government policy. We shouldn't learn to live with them any more than we should learn to live with governments that foist them upon us. What will it mean to impose green taxes on gas that the Institute for Fiscal Studies reckons will hit the poorest the hardest? What will it mean to ban petrol and diesel cars for electric models that are far pricier? What will it mean to impose a less reliable heat pump upon us all that currently costs between 8 grand and 14,000 quid? What will it mean if we set a tax upon meat, as the government's Behavioural Insights team has posited? What will it mean to tell hard-working Brits that unless innovative green technologies come galloping down the hill like a knight on a valiant steed, we would have to fly much less, or not at all, frankly, for going your one foreign holiday a year? I'll tell you what it'll mean. It'll mean that a country that emits 1% of global CO2 emissions makes life very nice for those who can afford it, but leaves the rest of us colder and poorer. I think it's time for a rethink on this miserable madness. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Rishi Sunak's got it all right, folks, and we just have to get used to this. And that, frankly, some families getting 350 quid to help them adjust to higher prices is just fine, even though only £150 will arrive by the time energy bills rise in April. I think it's time for a yes-no referendum on net zero that gives us all the facts and finally puts this debate to the public and not just to the Prime Minister. It's 2:13, and under Theresa May, the UK became the first major economy to pass a net zero emissions law. That means we all have to work to bring greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. So we've been asking people in the North East if they're happy to pay higher energy bills in order for Britain to reach this target.
I don't think they're ever going to reach the environmental targets, to be honest. Fuel prices are always going to go up. They're going up anyway. And can everyone really afford to pay more than what they're already going up in April? I don't think so.
No, I think we're charging far too much for the electricity as it is. And for it to go up is just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. We're paying enough in this shop as it is.
Yes, but as long as it's not too much more, because it's already high, isn't it?
No, because I don't believe a word that the government say they wouldn't do it, even if they said they would.
Some old people might just sit with a blanket or hot water bottle because they literally can't afford to put the heating on, which is very sad, really. They may have worked all their lives, and now they're in this situation where they can't afford to put the heating on.
People in the northeast there giving their opinion on whether or not they'd be happy to pay higher energy bills to reach net zero by 2050. So under these plans to reach net zero, many homes will need new boilers for heating, and in 2030, all new petrol and diesel cars are set to be banned, a move designed to encourage people to buy electric motors. It's reported that the Prime Minister is facing resistance from senior politicians over his plans to make the UK net zero in carbon emissions by 2050 to help ease the cost of living. Well, shouldn't we all just accept a higher cost of living to reach net zero? I'm delighted to be joined by the Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, and Hugh Lloyd. He's an executive member of the Labour Environment Campaign, the Socialist Environment and Resources Association. So, Lee, if I just start with you there, it's Lee Anderson, Conservative MP for Ashfield. Let me ask you directly. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, told a Downing Street press conference when he was talking about the cost of living and higher energy prices. He said these are something we have to get used to in the face of global supply problems. Is it right for a country that emits around 1% of global CO2 emissions that we here in this country should make our least well off both colder and poorer?
Well, hello, Darren. No, it's not right. It's not fair at all. And, you know, it doesn't have to be like this, Darren. You know, I can remember just a short while ago, we were jumping up and down celebrating that we'd not used coal in power stations for a couple of months. I think that was last year. Was really happy about that, was bragging about it openly. Hey, look, fast forward a few months and what's happening now? We're actually burning coal again in these power stations because gas is far too expensive. Now, you talk about a referendum. I've got a better idea than that. Let's have an opt-in, opt-out tariff on your fuel bills. If you want to opt in and pay that green levy, tick a little box, and then away you go. And I guess what? There won't be many people ticking that box. Probably a few in Islington and that part of the country, but not many in your neck of the woods, and certainly not many people in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, Hugh Lloyd, would you be willing to opt in to such a scheme?
Well, I think it depends what you think we're opting into. I think I'm opting into something that prepares the country for challenges to come. You know, you can look through history. That's what governments are about, preparing the country for challenges to come. You know, the heavier rainfall, the droughts. How can we reduce the impact of these things? So I'm prepared, and I know lots of other people are prepared, to put some investment into that. And it won't just be in your energy bills, because it will be realised in other places. You know, I guess the really important question I put to both of you, is this a question of a challenge or concern about the plans for net zero that this government have, or is it about net zero at all, or is it that you don't believe in climate change? Because, you know, it's quite important to be clear about where you've got your concerns.
Well, Hugh, what I would say to that, and I'll let Lee come in after I've said this, but what I would say to that is that this country emits less than 1% of global CO2 emissions. Why should we immiserate our least well-off, make them colder and poorer, when China burns fossil fuels at a rate of knots? Surely that's just self-harm.
Well, I agree with you. It shouldn't be for the lowest and the poorly paid to carry this burden. Absolutely. That's about how we do it. But I think I'm with you and a lot of the members of the audience. Britain is a great country, and Britain is a country that shows leadership to the world. We can show leadership. We showed leadership in the Industrial Revolution. We can show leadership again. But we really do, I absolutely agree, need to make sure it's not the poorest that pay for this. That's why the plans the government have announced for the rebates probably aren't right, because they put the burden in the wrong place. Let's sort that out. I'm sure Lee would help sort that out as a Member of Parliament.
Yeah, Lee, is that the case? It's just that the government have got it wrong, and in the sort of application of this restrictive policy.
Well, look, there was a lot of poor people during the Industrial Revolution, I seem to recall. I wasn't there at the time, but, you know, it's...
that may have been wrong as well.
All these periods throughout history seem to be built on the back of poor people, and we've got a perfect opportunity. Now, there's nothing wrong with the net zero journey we're going on. We all aspire to that. We all want to leave the planet in a better condition than when we arrived, but forcing people, to choose between, we're heating and eating, That's not fair at the moment. You know, gas prices are going through the roof, electric prices are going through the roof, and I would sooner see people warm now than green later.
Well, Lee, putting that, just coming back on that really quickly, my concern, right, is that when I voted for your party, when many people voted for your party, millions did, about 14 million in 2019, they actually voted for levelling up. They voted for actually their communities being focused on for the first time in generations. But actually, this government is saying that the taxpayer should pick up the tab for what is essentially the lack of commitment and action on climate change and net zero by countries like China. So where's that? Where's the levelling up in that, Lee?
Well, look, you know, we've seen the what's been happening over the past few weeks in Downing Street. You know, we met with the Prime Minister, all the backbenchers did last week. That's no secret. The press were outside listening in. And there's going to be changes. He says, you know, he's going to start listening more to backbenchers for policy. And in that backbench is lots of red wall MPs. And you know what? We come with different voices, different principles sometimes, and different accents, Darren. You know, and the Prime Minister and Number 10 and the policy makers need to listen to the red wall seats, because that's where our core vote is now, you know, and these votes were lent votes at the last election. If we get it right and stop penalising the poorer people in society, take them on this net zero journey, but don't penalise them. Nobody disagrees. Look, I've been on the doorstep for donkey's years.
Absolutely.
And this never, ever comes up on the doorstep. But if you ask them the question, do you want to leave the planet in a better state than when we arrived? 99% of people will say yes. If you ask the same people, do you want to pay for it? Then 99% of the people will say no. It's that simple.
Huel, the last question I'd put to both of you, would you both put your money where your mouth is, essentially, and pay more to reach net zero to help those less well off?
Yes, I already do. But I think the important thing is to build on Lee's point and your point. This is not a burden that should be put on the poorest. So it's about how we do it. But if you think about how we do it, let me finish, please.
Yeah, I will. But the Labour response,
you know, how we do it, it's about the buildings that we live in.
Exactly the same as the Tory response.
Having buildings done. No, that's the thing. We've got to start with the buildings that we live in. They're not as good as they could or should be. For too long, this country has allowed the building of poor quality homes that are under-insulated, that need more energy than they should. Let's start sorting that out. That doesn't have to be paid for in your energy bill. So you could find the resources from that, from the developers, from the construction sector, just as Michael Gove is already doing on Grenfell. So let's think about where we put the burden, because there is a thing that needs to be addressed here. You both agree with that. It's how, not whether.
Absolutely. So Lee, would you be happy to pay more then?
I'll have to good think about that, Darren. I already pay more from my income tax. You probably pay a lot more than me on your massive wages. You know, people who's on a better salary like me, who's doing... Look, MPs like me, we're on 81, 82 grand a year. We live in London. Some people think we live the high life. I don't have to worry about paying a gas bill or electric bill. I'm in that Westminster bubble. We need to get out in the real world, speak to some real people in Ashfield and in Durham to see how they cope every week with paying a few bills. Scrap the VAT, get rid of the green levy, and I think that would be a good start rather than what we've got at the moment. Because at the end of the day, you know, gas prices are going through the roof. We're reliant on foreign suppliers of gas. We've got gas underneath our feet. Let's frack it out. Let's expand in the North Sea. You know, there's a case for coal at the moment. Stop being silly about this coal extraction in this Whitehaven colliery in Cumbria. Let's have a realistic energy policy so we can transition fairly over the next 50 years so poor people won't bear the brunt.
Yeah, Huel Lloyd from the Socialist Environment and Resources Association and Conservative MP Lee Anderson. Thank you both very much for your time. It's 2:23. Plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. We'll be discussing what's happening in Ukraine, the build-up of tens of thousands of Russian troops on Ukraine's borders. It's escalated fears of an invasion. But first, let's have a look at the weather with Olivia Guthrie.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK's looking cloudy, wet and windy for many, with some wintry showers across Scotland. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, it should be mostly dry this evening, but it's going to turn increasingly cloudy, and 1 or 2 showers are possible before the rain arrives later. By 7 p.m, the rain will be starting to reach North London, drier further south. though rain will spread across most parts through the evening. A very wet and windy end to the day across Wales. The hills and mountains are likely to see some significant amounts of rainfall. Cloudy and wet as well for the Midlands. Outbreaks of rain will become more persistent and perhaps heavy at times. The winds will also be strong here at times. Whilst there may be some lingering clear breaks in the cloud in the northeast, for many it will be cloudy, wet and windy here as the rain spreads across to most parts. Southern Scotland will be cloudy and wet. Further north, there'll be some drier and clear breaks, but also plenty of sleet and snow showers with very strong winds for Shetland. It's also looking cloudy, wet and windy across Northern Ireland. The rain will be persistent and heavy at times, and the strongest winds will be around northern coasts. The cloud and rain will continue southwards overnight, with wintry showers feeding across Scotland into the far north of England. That's how the weather's shaping up tonight and to tomorrow morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, there's been talk for a few weeks of Russia invading Ukraine. There are tens of thousands of Russian troops on Ukraine's borders that have escalated fears of an invasion. Moscow says that they're just military drills, folks, nothing to see here. But Ukraine and its Western allies remain concerned that Russia is planning to launch an assault. Why would they do this? Can they be stopped? Do we need to interfere? Here to explain more, I'm joined by Mark Ullman, Director of the Crisis Research Institute in Oxford. Hi, Mark. Mark, why did all of this start? Why is this kicking off now?
Well, it's in a sense, it's coming to perhaps a peak now, but it's been going on for a while. Essentially, President Putin has never been happy about what has happened in Ukraine, really, over the last 15, 17 years. He believes that the Ukrainians should be what he calls a brother people of the Russians, and that they should orientate themselves towards Moscow. They should share a common history. They should share a common future, as it were. But what has happened in the last few years is that the majority of the politicians who got elected in Ukraine have wanted to move towards the West, join the European Union, and increasingly join NATO. And it's the NATO aspect that is the red line for Putin. We may say, why should he be worried about NATO? It's a defensive alliance. But he fears that if a country like Ukraine, which borders right up to Russia itself, it brings the border of Russia with a foreign great military alliance, something closer to Moscow than when Peter the Great was a boy, more than 300 years ago. So there's a sense of vulnerability in Russian history, and as has often happened in Russian history, when you feel vulnerable, you want to push out, lash out, dominate the neighbours.
Is that vulnerability because of the expansion of NATO and of the European Union? Is that exclusively to blame then? Have we in the West poked the Russian bear a little too forcefully?
Well, the problem is, as often is the case, you may not intend to poke the bear, but the bear feels poked. And also, the bear doesn't then say, why don't we all calm down? The bear pushes back. And, you know, you've been talking about all the political and economic and social crises that this country and many Western countries. And so if you're President Putin, you look at the West and you say, is this really such a formidable thing? You know, we in Russia lost the Cold War. We accepted, as it were, the dominance of the United States and its allies and their model of how to run society, to run the economy. Now that model seems to be going a bit haywire. Now the political elites in some Western countries seem to be almost off their trolleys in the sense that they don't know really what they're doing. They're behaving in ways to make themselves ridiculous. And so he feels, as somebody who doesn't have to worry about position, about a probing media and so on, that he can begin to push back. And of course, what we've seen in the last day or so is he's been in Beijing, he's been in China, meeting the president of China. And the huge geopolitical change of the last few years is that Russia and China, that were for many centuries great rivals, they bordered each other, they had disputes about where the border should be and so on, that they have now become close buddies. Russia is so confident of China's backing that it's removed thousands and thousands of troops from the Far East and along its border with China to bring them to these exercises in Belarus and on the borders of Ukraine. And so Putin feels that he has a big, powerful friend in China, and China feels that Russia is its potential backyard. It is an enormous resource.
Which is terrifying, Mark. It's really terrifying. But coming back to Europe ever so slightly, why have other European nations like Germany and I guess arguably like France not taken action and ignored what Russia is doing? Were you really alarmed to see the sight of UK forces having to go around, take the long road around Europe and not fly directly over Germany?
Yeah, we can see, yes, the problem is that inside NATO and within the European Union, there are these big, deep divisions. Some of the East European members of both NATO and the EU, like Poland, are taking the same kind of robust line that the British are taking from outside the EU. But the Germans are heavily dependent on Russian gas, and also they sell a lot of what metal is bashed with that Russian gas to make to Russia and China. They sell lots of Mercedes and BMW. We are so used to just importing from China that we forget that there are some Western countries that are still able to make money out of them, sell things to them. The problem is, of course, that binds you to them, and the Chinese and the Russians are very good at saying, here is a nice long line of cash that's going to come to you, but you better be aware that there's a political string attached to it. And then there's President Macron of France. He's going to Moscow on Monday. He is wanting to play, you know, the great mediator. There's horrible echoes of 1980 when Poland was
as well, isn't it, of course?
You know, and Giscard d'Estaing, the president, went to Moscow saying he would find a way to solve the problem. Of course, the Russians saw this as a sign NATO was divided and there was no need to back down. And I think this is the danger. Coming back to your questions about Ukraine, what Putin wants is for Ukraine to become docile and subservient. And he wants to show the Ukrainians that their desire to join the West, to join the EU, to join NATO isn't going to work, and that the people that they think are going to back them up are actually not going to do so. And of course, that is, potentially then incites the Russians to push a bit further forward. And the danger is that then you get a conflict that spirals out of control.
Well, exactly, Mark. That's the fear with all of us, and I'm sure many people at home as well. But thank you very much for shining some light on what is a fascinating but frankly terrifying state of affairs. That's Mark Allman, Director of the Crisis Research Institute. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, the Northern Ireland Protocol has been all over the news this week. We'll be breaking down exactly what it is and why it matters. Now it's time for a check on the news headlines with Olivia Guthrie.
Thank you, Darren. It's 2:34. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Former Schools Minister Nick Gibb has become the latest MP to submit a letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson. He's joined a number of fellow Conservatives calling on the Prime Minister to resign after allegations of lockdown parties at Downing Street. It's reported up to 17 MPs have now submitted letters, but a total of 54 are needed to trigger a vote of no confidence. Social media firms will now be forced to actively remove illegal content without waiting for it to be reported by users. Under the online safety bill, companies are required to remove a range of illegal material, but now several new criminal offences are being added, including revenge porn. Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries says the government hopes the bill will bring the full weight of the law against those who use the internet as a weapon. Boris Johnson has spoken with the French president over the tensions on the Ukraine border. Downing Street say Prime Minister and Emmanuel Macron both agree a diplomatic solution to the current tensions must remain the overriding priority. The French leader will visit Moscow next week to hold discussions with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The planned visit comes as China backed the Kremlin's demand that NATO doesn't allow Ukraine to join the military alliance. Over in the US, the former Vice President Mike Pence says he could not have changed the results of the 2020 presidential election. It follows renewed claims by Donald Trump that Mr. Pence could have overturned the Democrats' victory and that he should be investigated for failing to prevent Joe Biden taking office. A competition has been launched to find the new home of the railways. The winning town or city, which has to be outside London, will house the new Great British Railways headquarters. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says it should be somewhere well connected with a great railway history. The winner will be announced this summer. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Real Britain with Darren.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, welcome back to our virtual classroom, where we're going to be going back to basics. This is where we break down an issue that we're all talking about in the news, but may not always know exactly what it really is. So I want to better understand the Northern Ireland Protocol. I'm joined by Emma Little-Pengelly, former DUP MP, to explain more. Hiya, Emma. Emma, could you just break down for us what exactly is, in a nutshell, the Northern Ireland Protocol?
Okay, well, after the referendum, as you know, the United Kingdom committed to leaving the European Union. And at a very early stage in terms of those discussions, the issue around the UK's only land border came up. That land border is, of course, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So this raised a particular set of circumstances because the European Union is very, very clear about the requirements of what has to happen if goods are entering their European Union single market and customs union, and that requires checks and controls. So this raised the issue about how that would happen along the land border between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and concerns about any checks and infrastructure happening on that land border. So that raised the question about what kind of arrangements needed to be put in place to avoid the putting up effectively of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So that led to a very special set of circumstances, a set of arrangements called the backstop originally, now the Northern Ireland Protocol, and that was agreed by the UK government and put into domestic legislation by our Parliament.
So Emma, then, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, she's now, of course, the UK's lead Brexit negotiator since Lord Frost stood down. She said she would trigger Article 16 if the UK failed to secure changes to the protocol. What exactly is Article 16?
So Article 16 was a clause within the protocol, and it's a clause which allows either side, the European Union or the United Kingdom, to unilaterally suspend the protocol or provisions of the protocol. And they can do that in a number of situations which are set out in that Article 16. And that would include, for example, diversion of trade. It could also be about unrest, different issues involved in that. Now, the DUP and many others, including within the Conservative Party, have been calling for the UK government to trigger Article 16, because what happens when they trigger that is that then they enter into this sort of period of formal renegotiations and negotiations to see if these issues can be resolved. Here in Northern Ireland, it's absolutely clear that there has been a diversion of trade. You know, the protocol has been deeply controversial because it's effectively moved the external EU border and the requirements that the EU require of that border to being within the United Kingdom, between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. So that basically means a huge number of checks are happening, with goods in particular coming from GB to Northern Ireland. And it's caused a massive disruption in the internal single market of the United Kingdom and the internal trading area of the United Kingdom, all to try to prevent and help the European Union in terms of their requirements that they voluntarily put in place around the manning of their external borders.
And of course, the fact that Northern Ireland's, the majority of Northern Ireland's trade is actually with the rest of GB. So do you actually think then, or do you agree with those who would argue, well, Emma, that's all well and good, but actually to protect the Belfast Agreement, the protocol is absolutely necessary?
So this was very much the argument made at the time. But there are lots of issues around that. So the protocol is not just affecting business and trade within the United Kingdom. The argument was that actually the integrity of United Kingdom internal market and trading area should never have been on the table, should never have been up for negotiation, because the integrity of the EU single market would never have been allowed to be damaged in any way by the EU. So that's the first fundamental problem. The second is that the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, actually guaranteed that the people of Northern Ireland would remain part of the United Kingdom in all of its parts. And that's a specific language of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, in all of its parts. And yet the court in Belfast just recently, in the last number of months, held that one of the key aspects of the Act of Union, so the Act of Union which really forged that United Kingdom between ourselves and the rest of Great Britain, that a fundamental part of that Article 6, which is the guarantee of unfettered trade across our United Kingdom, that has been repealed by the protocol. So effectively, they've said a key part of our constitutional arrangements has actually been repealed by this. Now, of course, that's really controversial because the issue about Northern Ireland's position as part of the United Kingdom has been the subject of controversy. And indeed, the Belfast Agreement was supposed to respect the fact that Northern Ireland was part of the United Kingdom until the point that the majority of people in Northern Ireland wanted to leave. So look, this has raised economic issues, business issues and constitutional issues.
Yeah, speaking of that, do you think that this all makes a border poll much more likely? Do you think people will just be like, well, hang on a minute, maybe life would just be a hell of a lot easier?
So one of the problems around the diversion of trade issue in particular is that it's actually led to an increase in trade in terms of the all-Ireland economy. Now, that's not necessarily a problem in itself, but it is a problem where some political parties are trying to use that to push for their constitutional change arguments, to push to say that there should be a border poll and that Northern Ireland should leave the rest of the United Kingdom. There's no doubt that what we've seen in Northern Ireland is that they've used some of the issues and concerns around the protocol and Brexit to try to push their United Ireland campaign forward. You can see that from the announcements and pronouncements by the likes of Sinn Féin pretty much on a daily and weekly basis. So there's no doubt this has been deeply destabilising. But the biggest issue here, Darren, is that there's not a single unionist in Northern Ireland that supports this protocol. Not a single elected representative of unionism at local council level, right through to MLAs and MPs that support this protocol. So therefore, what we've got is an issue which is deeply divisive. The communities are very divided on this. Unionists feel that their place within the United Kingdom has been severely damaged. Yeah. Nationalists had argued very strongly there should be no compromise by the European Union on this protocol. And in all of this, it's business and consumers that are missing out.
Well, I think there are going to be fascinating times in Northern Ireland, it's safe to say, over the next few weeks. And we'll be covering it here on Real Britain, where we actually want to look at Northern Ireland and give Northern Ireland a little bit of TLC. Emma Little-Pengelly, former DUP MP, thank you for clearing that up for us. It's 2:46, I'm losing my eyesight, which means it's time for our campus clash. We're joined by students who are going to debate this very question. Should we scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol? I'm joined by Dean Keaton, a student from Dublin, and Jack Pringle, a graduate of the University of South Wales. Dean, if I start with you, should we have a Northern Ireland Protocol and why?
Yeah, so from our perspective in AINTU, the Northern Ireland Protocol is very important. We think it's centres around Brexit. We think that the protocol doesn't stymie Brexit at all. In reality, the protocol is Brexit and will allow for the most profitable and peaceful Brexit for the people of Northern Ireland. We also think that the protocol allows for British sovereignty to remain intact. And that's because it will allow Britain to maintain the treaties that it made with the international countries, both before its membership in the European Union and then after its membership.
So, Jack, I assume you would say, well, hang on a minute there, hang on a minute. Mm-hmm. What we've actually done is carve out a part of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I totally disagree with that at all. I mean, the protocol is causing massive disruptions in Northern Ireland. It's affecting a lot of businesses. Recently, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson said it's costing businesses 1.2 million a day, and the trade between the rest of the UK and Northern Ireland, and plus a DUP MLA said yesterday on Facebook that the health minister contacted her to say that the protocol is causing massive disruptions in terms of getting medicine shipped to Northern Ireland too. So the protocol is also diminishing our place within the United Kingdom because we're still part of a European single market, and we're still tied to the EU, and we can't determine our own laws. Our laws are determined by Brussels, and in my opinion, the protocol needs to go because it's diminishing our standing within the United Kingdom.
Well, on that point then, Dean, are you worried, given the fact that no unionist in Northern Ireland is standing up and saying, well, actually, I think this protocol makes sense. I think actually staying in the EU single market makes sense. Are you not worried about the fact that it is stirring up, I think, unrest, frankly, in Northern Ireland?
No, so we know that over 50% of the population of Northern Ireland have said that they're in favour of the protocol, and even more said that they think that this is a reasonable compromise. We know that 61%, from a study from the University of Liverpool, have said that that they're critical of the DUP's approach to the protocol. And we'd counter that by saying that the protocol actually represents an economic opportunity for Northern Ireland. The figure you've given, I know, has come under a lot of criticism recently, given that it's based on a limited set of data. But the opportunity in this is that it gives Northern Ireland access both to markets in the south of Ireland. As Emma was saying, we've already seen the benefits of that with the boom in north-south trade. It will give it access to British markets, and then also any free trade agreements that Britain makes with other countries going forward post-Brexit. The reality is the DUP are actually standing in the way of the protocol and standing in the way of Brexit and stopping us from moving on to issues that matter to the people of Northern Ireland.
But Jack, look, this means that as far as the United Kingdom is concerned, right, that Northern Ireland has different set of rules and regulations to the rest of the UK. That is fundamentally not something that unionist communities could ever accept. Are you really concerned about what this is doing for tension in Northern Ireland?
Yes, I'm really concerned because, as you saw back in April about the riots that took place in Belfast, and the reason why those took place was because a lot of unionists on the ground believe that their voices weren't being heard by the likes of Boris Johnson and some officials in the Republic of Ireland as well. And for me, if we want to have peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland, this protocol needs to be scrapped in its entirety because it's creating tension within the streets in Belfast and in loyalist areas. And plus, if the UK government really want to have a safe and peaceful Northern Ireland, they need to trigger Article 16 and it needs to go.
Yeah, Dean, then, would you agree that there are some negative effects of the Northern Ireland Protocol? Because the picture you're painting right now is one of Northern Ireland being a land of milk and honey under this protocol.
Well, I just want to address that point. I think it's very important to stress that we can't let ourselves be threatened by violence from a minority. We can't let the democratic process be held hostage to a tiny, tiny, tiny minority. Like I said, there are studies already showing that cross-community support has been shown for this protocol, and that, there are economic opportunities. This backstop is the DUP collapsing the executive is stopping us from addressing issues that affect the average people in Northern Ireland. We can't move on because we can't deliver on Brexit. We already know that over 500,000 people in Northern Ireland are either living in poverty or relative poverty. So this is stopping us from addressing these issues.
Dean, in one word then, would you scrap the protocol outright?
No, we believe that the protocol is the best way forward.
Jack, should we scrap the protocol? One word.
Yes.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. That's Dean Keaton, a student from Dublin, and graduate Jack Pringle. Thank you very much for debating this afternoon. And lastly, it's time to ask whether we should scrap, reform or keep. And for today's show, we're going to be looking at the House of Lords. It's an old institution. Some would say it's outdated. Some say it's the perfect counterweight to our elected House of Commons. Joining me to give their take is the social and political commentator Esther Craighew. Esther, hello. Isn't the House of Lords, the entire concept, frankly, of an unelected chamber grotesquely uneven, given the number of Lib Dems and Labourites that have been stuffed in there as political favours?
I know this may get me crucified, but I don't think so. Now, I can entertain an argument to reform the Lords, but I do think that it's better to keep it than to completely scrap it. And the reason why is I've been sort of a champion of the fact that I don't think many MPs in our House of Commons have any life experience, right? There are many people in this country that have just, lived a very comfortable, lavish life just on the public purse, being so-called public servants, not actually doing anything in terms of business or actual having a real life impact. And I think the benefit of having the House of Lords is you don't just have a bunch of really kind of out of touch individuals in the House of Commons just dictating policy. You actually have that layer of unbiased or unelected, technically, yes, but unbiased expertise saying, actually, hold on, are you sure you want to go ahead with this? And it's not like the Commons can't overturn, a block by the House of Lords. Anyway, at the end of the day, the public representatives and the public officials get the final say. But I do think it's a really good buffer to make sure that, really outrageous policies that could cripple industries are not implemented. And I think there's a huge wealth of knowledge in the Lords that we really don't want to get rid of and politicize by having a second elected chamber.
Esther, hang on a minute there. So you're saying we should reform, but many people watching this will be saying, actually, I think we should scrap because of the fact, right, if you consider 17.4 million British people voted to leave the European Union, you might argue that's a pretty significant democratic mandate. That was handed to the House of Lords, and the House of Lords said, well, actually, lads, hang on a minute. Theresa May at the time, they said, hang on, Teza, I actually want to tell you that I disagree massively. And the House of Lords did all it could to scupper that vote, to actually overturn a democratic vote. Imagine the gall of an unelected chamber that we're forced, the taxpayer pays an absolute fortune every year to actually subsidise what is a glorified retirement home. A lot of people watching this will be saying, hang on a minute, Esther, I think your sound is a pound, but on this one, you've got this wrong.
But that is the beauty of democracy, right? The House of Lords were checked, and they were checked because the Commons had the final say, and they said, actually, this is the largest democratic mandate we've had in British history. You cannot overturn that. So that was the check that there was on the House of Lords. Now, some people might argue, the Lords shouldn't have even had a say in that. But again, this is a once-in-a-lifetime vote. This doesn't happen regularly, right? I think on a regular basis, the kind of expertise that the House of Lords adds to Commons decisions is invaluable. And you have to look at it from this perspective. If you wouldn't trust the Lords, right, people with actual life experience who run businesses, who are experts in particular industries, if you wouldn't trust them for at least their feedback on things that are core to this country, are you really going to trust an overpaid public servant on 80 grand a year to make these decisions when they really haven't led lives? I mean, I'm sorry, we have people in the Commons that are former cleaners. Right? What expertise can they give us on education?
Exactly,
policy?
Esther. But we also, in the House of Lords, do we not, have a lot of people who are only there by virtue of the fact that they donated significant sums of money to either of the three main parties?
I do think that should be reformed. But again, scrapping an institution like the House of Lords, scrapping like an institution like the House of Lords is incredibly radical. I don't think it's really in sort of the British appetites to be that radical. I do think there's a lot of room for change and improvement. Yes, there are a lot of
Esther, that's brilliant. Thank you very, very much. I'm standing by scrap, honestly. Social and political commentator Esther Craigu, thanks for your time. Yous have been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. I'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. But for now, I'll leave you with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK's looking cloudy, wet and windy for many, with some wintry showers across Scotland. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest, it should be mostly dry this evening, but it's going to turn increasingly cloudy, and 1 or 2 showers are possible before the rain arrives later. By 7 p.m, the rain will be starting to reach North London, drier further south, though rain will spread across most parts through the evening. A very wet and windy end to the day across Wales. The hills and mountains are likely to see some significant amounts of rainfall. Cloudy and wet as well for the Midlands. Outbreaks of rain will become more persistent and perhaps heavy at times. The winds will also be strong here at times. Whilst there may be some lingering clear breaks in the cloud in the northeast, for many it will be cloudy, wet and windy here as the rain spreads across to most parts. Southern Scotland will be cloudy and wet. Further north, there'll be some drier and clear breaks, but also plenty of sleet and snow showers with very strong